What job should marketing get done in a company?
This is such a great question because teams really need to go back to this before they do one thing, right? I love the simple framework of know, like, trust. And that is often how people frame the purpose of content specifically. And in today's age, I think that marketing is founded in content. So I just listened to Jess Cook's episode, and she's a very well known content marketer, and she was focusing on the like part. That is not my view. I do not think that like comes first. I think that know comes first, and I think that the point of marketing is to help brands know you. So that connects more with like awareness, right, than likability. We can talk a minute about likability. That's a function of a couple things, but the very first thing of the know, like, trust pyramid is no.
That's Lee Densmer. She's a content strategist and content operations expert who's ran her own business for the last 3 years. She has over 25 years of business experience, with over 12 being directly in marketing. But at her core, she's a teacher, and in this episode, she goes off with sharing and teaching her wisdom. I hope you enjoy the episode, but before we get back to it, run the intro. Welcome to On Marketing, a show to help you think more strategically about marketing and life. I won't tell you what to think, I'll help you improve how you think. I'm Jordan Ogren, a marketing strategist with 9 years of experience and a podcast host for the last 4. This episode was originally recorded on January 23rd, 2026. All views shared are the individual views of the host and guests, not those of their employers or associated organizations. This show is for informational purposes, not professional advice. Thank you for being here. I like that because while I think sometimes from that episode just you're referencing, there's some stickiness or like it sounds good. Now, I recently spoke with Mark Rogers, who touched on kind of like being a step up of awareness is being preferred. How, like, clearly you need to be first known to be preferred. So your sense is still rational, still making sense. But do you think we over-index on the no part and fail to do some of the other things? Or do you think a lot of people actually just don't do the no part well and they're too focused on the how do we get trust and likability and all that?
Both. So, like you said, no has got to happen first. You can't build likability or credibility, and they all have to happen at the same time. So they're very related. But your strategy has to start with how to make people aware of us, and then how to make people aware of us in the best light, right? Which is likability. How do you want people to perceive you? So maybe I should tell a story about what I'm talking about here that may illustrate it. So I worked with a brand. I'm a consultant. I worked with 20 brands over the past 3 years, but I was working with a brand who wanted to work on their content marketing to grow awareness, to grow their revenue. That's the bottom line, is how do we grow our bottom line? And there was pretty good awareness about who they were. They were all over the place. They were on podcasts. They were blogging all the time. They had pretty good SEO, all the things, in a 30-year-old company. What they didn't have was the likability factor. So this is an example of a company that did get the no part already pretty well, but they did not have the likability part. It was pretty clear why as I started digging into their content. So their website was super corporate, like blue and white, some black, so very like masculine, typical, it was giving very corporate. All of the pictures of their C-suite were suits, very like, and they're in IT. So I think that, and they would not move off center off of that brand look and feel, but it was making them come off as a little bit stiff, academic, formal. We're in IT. People wear lawn mowing clothes to work. So if you want to do business, right? If you want to do business with somebody who's like you, likable, the root there is like, similar and likable, then you need to be able to relate. So they were making themselves unlikable and unrelatable because of their brand vibe. It took me a long time, but I was able to turn them around into a different tone of voice, different CEO, profile images, and that increased their likability factor, and the brand was able to grow because of it. So that's how they interrelate, Jordan, is you've got awareness, people know who you are, but do they come and visit your site and find you likable? We've got a real problem if they don't.
I love that story, Lee. And I think the the themes or the things I'm pulling out is how so much is, to your point, intertwined with like their audience. Now, maybe if their audience was financial advisors or different, then you have a whole different relatable. I love that, because what one thing is relatable to one person might not be relatable to another, which then goes to that core of like understanding your audience or all of those things. Now, you touched on content being kind of your area that you specialize in, which though kind of always spans so much more. But talk to me about in content. What are maybe some things that don't create that relatability, likability, or some of that? I know it's going to be so different for every type, but then maybe what are some things within content that lead to people more liking? Or because I know the knowing part would just be putting stuff out or trying to understand what those customers want to even know about in your the knowing, but I'm curious more on like how does content create that likability, or how does it deter from the relatability, likable?
There's a direct connection. So, as I just mentioned, if your tone of voice is stiff or authoritative or even arrogant, and that's not a fit for your target market, then you won't be likable. If it is a fit for your target market, then you need to lean in. So, but there's a difference between the way maybe the C suite thinks they want to sound and the way they should sound to relate to connect with that target market. So, tone of voice is one factor that affects likability. Look and feel is another factor that affects likability. Do you look, fun? Do you look silly? Do you look irreverent? Do you look, and that, I think that those factors have changed a lot in the past 5 years, whereas corporations used to be more buttoned up, and now it's like, be silly, use humor, use these different stylistic mechanisms to show that you are likable, incredible. So, and then the other thing is the actual content itself. Are you being promotional? Well, that's not really very likable. Or are you being useful, educational, inspirational? So, content's first purpose is to inspire and educate and motivate, not to promote. And I think 10, 15 years ago was to promote, and now it's 100% not. That doesn't mean that there can't be promotion. It's very subtle, it's very soft, and it's after you've educated.
I like the fact that you touch on culture. That not only does your audience, which does like depend, but the culture has moved to this place. To your point, where silly Nutter Butters on TikTok doing just crazy stuff, and it's like that wouldn't have got anybody in a C-suite to okay that 5, 10, 15 years ago. But the culture has moved to this. I'm maybe more of a critical analyst, but like this brain rot phase, or like this unique place that we've gotten to where it's like, wow, like, yeah, how I show up as a brand is vastly different, even if my customers haven't changed, because culture, the water in which we swim, has kind of changed. It's more murky or more transparent or whatever. So I really like that you touch on that. One of the things, Lee, that I would love to get inside your brain on is not just, which was very helpful on there on like a piece of content, but I think you think very strategically and well about the whole system of content. You had a recent post about like newsletters and LinkedIn posts. I personally get so much joy out of having a system like get the not the least amount of input, but like a minimum input to the maximum output, where you do a LinkedIn post, you do a handful of them, and then that is a signal of what do we write about in our newsletter. Talk to me about how you think in total about content systems and all that, and then maybe if you want to actually have like that newsletter LinkedIn play, because I found that to be quite interesting.
My foundation, my framework comes from seeing brands kind of work in an isolated way on blog posts, and then a newsletter, and then your social, and then an ebook. And they're even done by different writers. They're done without any interrelationship. And that wastes a lot of synergy, which turns into money and lost opportunities, and lost ability to repeat your messaging in the market. So when you are able to build a plan that brings them all together, you're getting your message to market more consistently, you're saving the time of writers, you're creating fewer deliverables. But let's talk about how that works. So the first thing you need to do is kind of find your center of gravity. And that's what I call it, center of gravity for a content program. It can be a podcast. It can be your blog. The blog is probably the most common one. It can be, let's see, what else can it be? Those are the two most common ones. Podcast being very recent and blog being like, 20 years old. Still solid though. From once you decide that that's your center of gravity, that is the springboard for everything else. I love having the blog be your center of gravity because it's the absolute perfect length to explore concepts in depth that matters to the readers, right? Short form content should never be your center of gravity, like LinkedIn. It just shouldn't. That should be a derivative. So you start with these strong, educational, interesting, customer focused blog posts, and then you create 10 social media posts, one newsletter. If you've been writing in a theme, then you stitch 4 blog posts together to make an ebook that you shouldn't gate, but it's another form of content. It's another form of content that comes from this holistic plan, right? So you're developing themes and points of view, expanding it in your center of gravity, and then, like I say, atomizing it into different content pieces so there's consistency in the way you're talking about things and in your themes. That's how you get known for one theme or one point of view.
That makes a lot of sense. I like your center of gravity, or I call it my macro content or something like that, where it's like that's the thing at which, to your point, everything's a derivative of that. It's the original thing, and then it gets. But there's an art to that too, of like actually repurposing things. Where I know Amanda, I'm gonna butcher her last name, talked about 0-click content, and that for me was like, it's like no duh. Like once I read that, I'm like, yeah, that makes so much sense. That like you have to balance. Like yeah, you have a blog, but you also have to have content consumable on that native social platform. So it isn't like, hey, I'm gonna give you nothing, and you have to go one click to get the value. So I love that. Yeah, I can imagine you're on that train as well, Lee. So I love that.
The resistance to 0-click content is really interesting. And let's talk about that in a minute. What was your question?
No, I'd love to go there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the resistance to doing that.
Because I get it all the time, especially in newsletters and social posts where people love to put links in there. So they like to tease the idea and then put a link in there, and they do it to drive traffic back to the website. This is a mistake because of the rise of AI. So driving traffic back to the website, unless you're the leader in a category and have 20 years of SEO, that should not be your purpose. That is not the purpose of content. It is a tactic, but dragging people to your website shouldn't be the point anymore. It should be educating and inspiring and motivating through that content. So you add a click in your newsletter, you add a click in LinkedIn, and it makes people work too hard. It makes people work too hard to get the juice, you know? And if you give them the goods in that native content, natively, meaning give all the information in your LinkedIn post, give a really good tactic in your newsletter, then you are growing that know, like, trust factor. Because you haven't made people you haven't dragged them back to your website to learn the thing. And it's also true that putting that link in your LinkedIn post just hurts your reach. So doing anything to hurt your reach, since reach already sucks right now because SEO isn't working, it's just going to shoot yourself in the foot. But I still see brands like their newsletters are blog post, blog post, blog post. Call us if you need help, right? And you're like, if I see another HubSpot template with 4 featured blog posts, stop that.
Preach, Lee. One final question on this marketing content angle is as you've alluded to, you've talked to a lot of different companies. What in your career, in maybe the last 1, 2, 3 years, you've changed your mind on, whether fully, of like, websites? Maybe for me, I used to hold this website was a storefront, where maybe I've changed now where it's like the back office, social is a storefront, where they come in first on your social. And then if they want to learn more, what is something for you where you've changed either full 180 or just maybe slightly of like, I think differently about that tactic, that strategy, that thing within marketing content? Does anything come to your mind?
15 years ago, when I started in content, it was about bringing people back to your website. So it was very much about wrapping a blog post around a keyword. And that is a mechanical, kind of formulaic way to write content rather than a customer-focused way to write content. So that isn't somewhere where my mind changed, but it became obvious pretty quickly that wrapping content around a keyword was just, it is a dead end because we're not dragging people to websites anymore. Probably another thing that I've come to champion is limiting the number of topics you talk about and limiting the number of people you talk to. So a lot of brands say we need to talk about 20 things. These are all really important, but that dilutes your focus. You can't have deep expertise on 20 topics. You need to own 3 or 4 or 5 in the market. Stick to it, stick to your lane. Because if you're over here and over here and over here, then it's not really clear what you stand for. So I have gone from helping teams create like tons of topics to creating pillars, themes, and then just very tight topics underneath them. The other thing that over time I've seen shift and that I help my customers shift to is they used to profile maybe 12 or 10 buyers, target buyers. And now I say do 3, do 4, and do them well. And often teams would profile anyone who might buy from you, like literally anyone. Now this guy might buy from me and that, but no, look at your historical data and look at your goals and profile the 4 that are going to bring in the most revenue for you. That allows you to be very specific in your content for them. That allows you to study them and write content that's for them and put it on channels where they hang out. And that, nobody has a huge marketing team and endless budget, literally no one. So narrowing your focus allows you to really spend your money in a more tactical, strategic, focused way. Less is more.
It truly is, especially in today's age. I feel like that statement's only being more and more true. But no, I love what you said, because at least the last 2 points are kind of all about focus, whether focus on topics or focus on the audience. And I've always had I don't want to call it a beef because personas aren't like a human, but I've always had a beef with creating these kind of like basic templated personas. And then you have like 10 of them and it's Jim Bob that is like 47. And it's like, did we have like how like, and then I prefer like jobs to be done or some of these other ways of like, what are they hiring? What progress are they hiring us for? And then that becomes like more succinct of like, there's only 3 jobs versus 10 to 15 random people that we put a persona on and then used an AI ChatGPT photo of a person to try to think like, oh, when I'm writing, it's them. No, I love that. And then the topics I think is like, I always think of brands as humans, and I know a lot of humans, some friends that it's like, I don't know what they're going to talk about. It could be talking about like geopolitics one moment, and the next moment it's like solar energy, where I love when I have a convo where it's like, we're going to talk about God, marketing, and kids. So like it's very specific, and I can trust that person because they have kids, so I know they're somewhat intelligent on it. So I really like that succinct topics and then succinct audience of just having a few. So those are really good points.
I like that idea. I was almost going to mention a minute ago the idea of a brand as a human. Think of the brand as a person instead of as I don't know. I don't know. It's more like you playing tennis with one other person instead of you watching a football game, right? Old marketing versus new marketing. I also have friends who are reliable for certain topics. And this is actually something kind of fun to talk about. Shannon is reliable for entrepreneurship, motherhood, and health. And Sarah is reliable for travel and cooking, whatever. And then you seek those people when you feel like talking about those different things, right? So you want to be the brand that people seek for information on those specific things, right? But you don't want to be known for 15 things, like I said before, or things that don't even connect. So I like that framework. So thinking of a brand as the friend people want to go to for advice on XYZ, that also may help you think of an appropriate tone of voice to talk to people. Friendly. Right?
Yeah, I love
normal. I mean, my best friends are funny and they're snarky and they're kind of silly.
And I love that. And I think there's just the natural thought that if someone knows everything, they almost know nothing. Like there's a kind of a limit to that where you just become then not known for anything. So I think it's staking those 1, 2, 3 things that we want to be known for, which are topics or concepts or things. That makes a lot of sense. I recently started using this exercise when rebranding or thinking about your brand is like, if your brand walked into a bar, like what does it do? Does it like, because I know we all have different, like I'm not someone who walks into a bar and goes right to it and like, what's up everybody? I might go around the walls a bit. Where is my people? But some brands walk right in. They're like, yo, this is a party. I am the life of the party. So I think that's like helpful to get it out of a logo, colors, fonts, to be like, yeah, how would our brand just show up to the party? Does it announce it's here? Does it find some friends, or does it find someone no one knows? And it's that kind of a bridge to those people. You could think of homeless shelters or some of those things where it's like, oh, that would be how our brand walks in. We go right to the people that aren't getting attention or things like that. So no, I love it.
A brand should walk in with one target. A brand should walk into a party with one target audience. Who am I going? There's a plan before you go to the party. It's who am I going to talk to? Because there's a purpose to the party, right?
It's a birthday party. It's a celebration. Yeah, that's true. Retirement party. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a
I
purpose
like
to
this,
the
Lee.
party.
You're
Yeah, I know.
you're
Another
building
thing,
this out in my head.
yeah, let's go with it. Another thing that I notice a lot is the number of CEOs or leaders who want to be present on LinkedIn. And so they start posting content. They're told to just post, right? They're told to just start posting, talk about your business, talk about your life. What ends up happening is they post about anything that comes to mind, and it ends up feeling a little bit like just a verbal flood, right? Similar to a brand, leaders on LinkedIn need to focus on 2, 3, or 4 pillars. I talk about corporate culture. I talk about our product. I talk about 3 or 4 things, and that's it. I don't talk about how I run marathons. I don't talk about parenting, and on and on. Because when you talk about those things, you might get followers and you might get traction and engagement, but it's probably not the right kind. It's people who may like reading what you have to say, but it's not driving your business forward. We are also freaking busy. So if you are going to post content, you are, I mean, we all are. We all just run around and work and all the things that we have to do. So you need to make every bit of your content count. So the days of just, and the guidance to just put it all out there on LinkedIn, to write about anything on your blog or on LinkedIn it's bad advice. I would much rather have people write 2 social posts a week or 1 blog post a month than just write about whatever comes to mind that week.
Yeah, it's more in service of our ego than our business objectives at that point. So no, I love that.
Mhm.
Dopamine's hard to, once you get a few of those quote unquote viral, a lot of likes, usually they're around content that isn't, to your point. It's like some story about some customer experience, which is somewhat, but like it's goes viral based off of something else, and then you get the dopamine rush. So yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Lee, I think we could go forever on content marketing, so I'm gonna switch it to more of a potentially more important topic of life. Are you ready to dive into this
Sure.
segment? So Lee, just for you, because every human has their own answer, what is the purpose of life? What are you hiring life to do so that at the end of your life, you would look back and if you did this, you would say that was a life well lived?
For context, I'm Gen X and I'm in my 50s. And it would maybe be obvious to say that your purpose in life changes every decade. And like you said, everybody has a bit of a different purpose. My purpose now, as I'm kind of in the, I would say that people in their 50s are at the top of their professional game, but I do have not working on my horizon. So at this point, my purpose is to leave an impact and leave a legacy by helping as many people and brands as possible. And I'm talking about my kind of professional, like, my lens here is professional, but also personal. So what do I need to learn? Who do I need to meet? What do I need to do? Where and how do I need to show up to leave my legacy? And what is that legacy that I want to leave? So I'm giving that a lot of thought. I don't want to be the advisor, but I do want to be the truth teller, and I want to be the teacher, and I want to be the kind of information provider.
I was just going to ask, to your point of purpose changing and kind of being different in each stage, what maybe was an early purpose for you? There's this quote, Thomas Merton, that says, you'll put your ladder up against a wall and climb to the top of the wall, and you'll look around and realize that a different wall was where I should have put my ladder. Like, I think that's it true within purposes, or my purpose is to make as much money, become the best business person, then you get there or you get close. Like, did you have other purposes or other drivers in your life that maybe now with your perspective and your years of wisdom, you're able to like get to your answer that you just got to? What would be some of those other purposes or different angles?
Yeah, at first I want to say that putting your ladder against a wall is never a mistake. That will lead you to the next wall and the next ladder, right? I would never say that the ladders that I put against certain walls were mistakes, but I do like that mental image. At different times, my purposes have been to raise a child, like pure focus, just that is the most important thing in my life. And they have been to build relationships with my family and my spouse. So the most important thing at a certain time was how do I deepen these relationships? There have been times when I focused on my health, and this is a year to year basis. There have been times when I focused on making money because I needed to, and also because I think you just said it, it fed my ego. There were times I focused on chasing a title, which that one eventually became meaningless, but I think we all chase titles for a while. Actually, the title I have now is the coolest one I've had, which is business owner. Yeah, different purposes. And then there have been times when I really put myself on a path of growth, of learning. Like I said before, I need to learn something. So that is my purpose at this particular moment. But the umbrella around all the purposes, kind of the who I am, is teacher. That's been the theme my whole life, and it's why I wrote the book that I wrote. I spent last summer writing a book, which was pretty fun, actually. It was super fun. It was really hard, but it was rewarding and fun. And that's why I wrote the book. I thought I've got all this content and all these thoughts, and I've learned so much. And it just was natural for me as a teacher and a writer to put it into a book format.
If you haven't checked that out, please do. I need to read it. There's a handful of books by people like you, Lee, on LinkedIn that I have in my to buy cart. So I would highly recommend the listeners also check that out. What is something that you think we in this world, and now I don't want this to be at all judgmental because I'm assuming you're going to be someone who sees what that is that also is within you, but like what is a virtue, a thing at which you want more of us to be doing, or maybe we are losing it slightly? Like, does anything, a belief even, or a virtue that comes to your mind that you're like, I wish more people did this or exuded that?
Oh, I'm going to say curiosity and openness to learning and curiosity. I was going to say without getting political, but this does come from where we're at right now as a country and in the world is be open to other perspectives, be open to sources of information, be open to shifts in your own knowledge, and always be learning. I think that's so important. The people who I respect the most are always learning and asking each other, like, I read this, I have this thought, what do you think? Learning, sharing information, being open-minded is so crucial in every aspect of your life. In relationships with my husband, okay, you've got that opinion, tell me more. Why do you think that? When I'm teaching, when I'm learning, in all instances, that has supported my growth and that of others.
I like that because the word that comes to my mind with curiosity is a humbleness. Because to be curious, one has to be willing to explore places in which most uncurious people would be like, that's stupid. I don't care about their perspective. I don't want to understand what maybe it's like to be Somalian in Minneapolis or all of that. I just kind of throw my judgments on that versus being curious. And I find the curious state is sometimes hard to maintain because as this teacher and knowing stuff, you're constantly of like, you're a good teacher because you're curious, which then makes you have more knowledge. But then like, how do you remain in that kind of curious state? So then when you're teaching, you're still able to be like, help me understand why you had that answer and not what I think would be the right answer. How do you balance like being humble and also having knowledge or experience to share?
It's really hard because I think we all have a place at which we get stubborn. Like, I'm done learning. I'm tired. You're not absorbing the information. I firmly believe this and I'm not talking about it anymore because I'm right. I mean, we all have those feelings. And so maybe it's about training yourself over life to get to that point later. Slow your roll. Like, I'm not going to put on my stubbornness until I hear more. I'm not going to dig in until I hear more. But there is a point where you're like, yeah, this is what I believe and I can't shift from it, in work or in politics or, these are my boundaries. It's boundaries. These are my boundaries. This is my bottom line.
I love that. I think a term is like strong beliefs held lightly, which then you're kind of able to shift those versus the other where it's like weak beliefs held strongly, where it's like you haven't actually done much research on the other side. I think being a Christian or being someone, a follower of the way, I find so much value in reading from atheists, from Buddhists, from all of that, because I'm just trying to understand, how do they see the world, and maybe trying to pull the thread of like, what's a good human, not just what is my religion like.
So I was raised Unitarian, and this deeply impacted my life. And we don't go to church now, but do you know anything about the Unitarian Church? Should I just outline it for our listeners here? So Unitarians believe that there's value in every religion. And so I grew up looking at viewpoints from all different religions and studying texts from all different religions: Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianism, Latter-day Saints, all of it. And that was so valuable to me for my growth and my intellectual capacity and my ability to empathize, because I was not taught that one worldview and one framework was the only and the right one. I was taught that no framework is the only and the right one. And I was taught that there are many different paths to the truth. It's like a wheel. So the center of the wheel is the truth, whatever that is, but there's many different ways to get there, and all are valid. And so that really defines part of who I am and how I live my life, because we don't all get things done in the same way. We don't all see things the same way, but the fundamental goals are often the same, right? There's more than one way there's more than one way to skin a cat. That's the gist here. That's the Unitarian credo, is there's more than one way to skin this cat. I loved it. And if I were to go back to a church or a life philosophy, it would be something like that.
Yeah, I've heard it say that it's a lot of these religions are just pointing at the same moon per se. Mm-hmm. And it's pointing you're at a different point at which you're pointing, but it's to the same. Love others, put others first. I mean, the central commandments of Jesus: love your neighbor, love God. He doesn't get into homosexuality. He doesn't get into those issues that we've now, as at least a Christian group, have become so focused on. He never cared much about those. So yeah, no, I'm always similar. What's the golden kernel here, and how can I pull from as many domains, religions, life philosophies? So no, I really enjoy that. And it's funny how those things imbue ourselves forever in our life, of how those early experiences. I actually was just talking with someone, and I'm with a young daughter. Me and my wife kind of figure out, how do we give her God, religion, because clearly I've had a past where it's like, I don't want her to go through that, to relearn so much and have to do that. But the ability, or the having when I was 7 or young, to know God loves me no matter what, that gives a kid something that, not realizing that there's anything out there that loves me, that part of it I want to give our daughter, because of the confidence I have simply because of that. And it didn't just affect me when I was 8, that now is forever, of this confidence of now it's more of not God out there, but God within me, and the I am is Christ within me. And how do I honor that? And how do I see Christ in every other person, because I believe we all have that I am within us, which would be kind of a universalist of we're all one. We have different names, different colors, different preferences, but I hurt you, but if I hurt you, it would actually be hurting me, because we have the same essence. That's kind of where I've kind of taken all these different religions. I'm that seems like that's what they're all saying. But no, I really enjoy that. A final question, Lee, here, because again, I think I could probably talk to you about life as well forever. There's a movie called Inception. If you've watched it, if you've not, a quick synopsis is these individuals go into people's dreams to incept mostly malicious ideas: sell the company, give me this much stake in it. So then the next day they wake up and that dream is their own. And then they live out of that dream as if, I need to sell my company to this person. We're going to be more benevolent with ours, but what idea, what concept would you incept in the minds of every human? So tomorrow, Saturday, January 24th, we wake up and we say that idea is our own, and we live out of that idea as our own. So whatever your idea is, I'm now equipping myself with that. What idea do you incept in the minds of every human?
I think I'd say I'm going to learn something today. I'm going to expand my knowledge about something today. Is that getting to know somebody better? Is that deepening my skill with X? Is that learning something new about an area of interest? Whatever. What am I going to learn today?
That's a perfect bow as a teacher. I wouldn't expect any other idea to be incept.
George,
I love it.
I can't not be myself.
And we love you for that, Lee. Well, that is all I have. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. This was a very fun conversation.
Yeah, super fun. I enjoyed it. Thank you, Jordan.
And this is the end of the podcast. What one idea or topic of conversation stood out to you today? Write it down, share it with a friend, posts on social. The main thing is take action. That's how we go from theory to mastery. We need to practice. We need to put it into practice. Thank you for listening and being here, and I hope you tune in next week.